All right, guys, let's get started. All right, guys, welcome to another exciting day of biology. So we have our topic for today. It says flow of energy through a food chain. Okay, so we're going to talk about food chains, energy flow, eating, all of that fun stuff. So first things first, we've already talked about interactions of organisms. First, what is an organism, right? What is an organism? An organism is an individual living thing, right? And they can interact in many ways. So one of the ways we talked about them interacting was through competition. They're competing over a limited resource. So in some of your responses I saw in the symbiosis video, some of you guys said, so a lot of people said that they would fight over the phone, they fight over where they put their stuff in their room, if they share a room with their siblings, so you compete over a limited resource. Then there's also symbiosis. We talked about symbiosis with those close relationships between different individuals. So we talked about like with the honeybee and the flower, how they both benefit and that's a mutualistic relationship. We talked about the dog and the tick, which is a parasitic relationship. And then we talked about barnacles on a whale, which is a commensal relationship. Okay, so talk about those different symbiotic relationships. And then, of course, seems to be everyone's favorite to talk about is predation, predator-prey, where one organism actually eats, hunts, kills the other organism, as shown in this picture right here. So what actually happens when one organism eats the other? So think about when you eat something, what actually happens? Like, why do we have to eat? So it's actually what's called a food chain, a chain of food. Okay. So that happens when one organism eats the other. It's going to form what's called a link in the food chain. That food chain is a series of organisms that eat one another so that energy and nutrients flow from one to the next. So you may not know this. Well, actually, you probably should know this. But like when you eat, the reason why we eat is because we need energy and nutrients from other organisms, right? Energy and nutrients are going to flow from one organism to another. Okay, and this is what a food chain looks like if you don't know what one looks like. Okay, so energy starts off here from the sun. It's going to go through a plant. When that plant gets eaten, that energy is passed on to that organism. When that organism gets eaten, the energy is passed on to the lion. When that lion dies, it's going to decompose, and its energy is going to be passed on to a beetle. Okay? So let's say you ate a cheeseburger for lunch. Right? That's a very common meal. You might eat a cheeseburger for lunch. What type of energy are you getting? So, of course, there's you are the final food chain, the final link in this food chain that we're talking about, right? You're eating your burger, right? The burger is made out of cow, and that cow actually ate grass. So as you're eating the cow, as you're eating the burger, you're going to get some of that cow's energy. So the energy started in the grass. The cow ate the grass, got energy, and then you ate the cow and got the cow's energy. However, what if you ate lettuce on your cheeseburger? Then you're going to have what's called a food web, which is another link in the chain. That lettuce plant's energy is being passed along to you. So that brings me to my next thing, distinction between a food chain and a food web. So a food chain is going to be one simple linear pathway. So this word right here, linear just means line. So one after the other after the other. That's a linear pathway. Versus a food web is going to be many different food chains all overlapping each other. So this is a very simple food web where there's multiple chains, right? Because the grass to the cow to the human, that energy is being passed from the grass to the cow, then from the cow to the human. That's one chain. And there's another chain down here, though, with the lettuce plant being passed on to you. So what type of strategies do organisms even use to get food? So there's these two words, vocab words, autotroph and heterotroph. These are words you're going to have to know for the entire school year. So learn them now because these are very important for everything in biology, okay? Every single thing in biology. So autotrophs make their own food automatically, okay? Notice that I underline automatically so that you can remember automatic, autotrophs. Autotrophs make their food automatically. Then we have what are called heterotrophs. Heterotrophs must eat other organisms to get food. So think about it. You yourself, what do you think you are? So an autotroph is going to form the base of all energy and food pyramids, right? The energy that they capture from light or chemicals is going to sustain all other life. These are what are called producers. They're producers. They produce the energy available to us here on Earth. So examples of autotrophs are going to be plants, photosynthesizing bacteria, and what are called chemoautotrophic bacteria. So essentially those three categories of organisms, what they do is they don't need to eat, they don't need to hunt, they don't need to kill, they don't need to do any of that. All that they have to do is stand out in the sun and photosynthesize. Then boom, that's their food, right? Versus you and I, we can't just stand out in the sun and get food. If we did, that would be pretty cool, but we don't. We have to actually eat our food. Okay, so we are not autotrophs. We are what are called heterotrophs. So heterotrophs, we can't capture light and chemical energy to turn it into food. What we have to do, we have to eat other organisms in order to survive. Right? So we have to eat a cow, eat some lettuce, eat some broccoli, eat things, right? We have to eat these things that are other organisms, there are other plants, that are other animals to survive. These heterotrophs are called consumers. So some examples of those would be bears, elephants, tigers, most animals, well, not most, all animals are heterotrophic. So examples of heterotrophs are going to be animals, fungi, many bacteria, and decomposers. Okay? So again, just to recap, as I said, this is muy importante, very important, extremely important. Autotrophs make their own food automatically. They don't need any help. All they do is sit out in the sun and boom, they've got food, they've got energy, they're good to go. Versus you and I, we have to eat other organisms in order to get food, in order to be fed, in order to have our nutrients. We're heterotrophs. So let's see how the energy and nutrients actually cycle through a community. After being eaten, how does that actually go through a community? So let's start with a very simple food chain. So this right here is a very simple food chain. This thing right here, a very simple food chain. It's just for demonstration purposes. Okay? Oh, so scared myself. So all energy on the earth comes from the sun. The sun is our glorious energy source. Solar energy is captured by photosynthesizing plants here on Earth. Those plants are called producers, called autotrophs. Those mean the same thing. Okay? Those autotrophs are going to use solar or chemical energy in some cases to make their own food automatically. Then we have consumer. The very first consumer in a chain is called the primary consumer because primary means first. So the primary consumer is usually an herbivore. It eats herbs. Then the second consumer in a chain is going to be the secondary consumer. They eat the primary consumer. Then we have what's called the tertiary consumer. Tertiary means three. They're the third consumer in the chain. They're going to eat the secondary consumer. And then last but not least, we have what is called the quaternary consumer. Quaternary, like quarter, could be four. Okay, four. Organisms that eat the tertiary consumer. This is usually the apex predator at the top of the food chain. And I'll tell you why food chains don't go on really much past this level right here. Okay, so again, to recap what we just learned. Autotrophs are called producers, or producers are called autotrophs. It means the same thing, okay? These are going to be plants, photosynthetic bacteria, and chemoautotrophs. They're going to use the sun's energy, I'm pointing at it, they're going to use the sun's energy to create their own food. Then we have what are called the consumers, right? They're not producing anything. They're only consuming. They're only eating. They're not producing anything. That first consumer is called the primary consumer. That second consumer is called the secondary consumer. That third consumer is called the tertiary consumer. And that fourth consumer is called the quaternary consumer. Okay? So again, we have our consumers, they eat to get their own food. These are the heterotrophs. Then we have our producers, which are plants and photosynthetic bacteria that use sun and chemical energy to make their own food. Okay? However, energy transfer between different levels in a food chain is very inefficient. It's very inefficient. So there's this thing called the 10% rule. So the 10% rule states that only about 10% of the energy will actually be passed from one trophic level to the next. Oh, but what does trophic level mean? Trophic level just means a level in the food chain. One thing to say, I couldn't skip this. So the 10% rule means that 10% of the energy from one trophic level will be passed on. The rest of it is lost as heat, waste, or cellular products. So if you eat a whole thing, some of the energy that you ate is going to be used to pump your heart, for you to speak, for your muscles to contract, for you to do what you need to do, right? Because you actually use energy to do all of those things. You also have waste products. And you also produce heat. So all of those things take up some of that energy. So only about 10% of energy will be passed on from one trophic level to the next. So a trophic level, again, is going to be a level in the food chain. So if we're talking about this down here, we're talking about this level right here is level 0. The producers are level 0, right? Because we said our primary consumer is level 1, our secondary consumer is level 2, and our tertiary consumer is going to be level 3. And if we kept going, we can do quaternary up here at level 4. So trophic level just means a level in the food chain. So that's that 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And then down here below that, producers are level 0. So now let's do some calculations. Let's see what that 10% rule actually looks like, because you will be asked to calculate energy at different levels. But luckily, since it's 10%, it's pretty easy calculations, but I just want to walk you through it. So let's say the green algae in this ecosystem has about 20,000 kcal. I just made that up, okay? Let's just say it has 20,000 kcal of algae. How much can we expect the primary consumer level to have? How much energy will they get? Right, so if you said 10% of 20,000, you are correct. 10% of 20,000. So let's go ahead and calculate that real quick. That's going to be about 2,000 kcal. And I use the calculator. You can use a calculator, whatever. You can do it in your head if you're a super genius. Do whatever you need to do. Okay, so it's about 2,000 kcal. So just going from the producer level up to the first consumer, we've lost so much energy. So much of it has already been used up. Now we only have about 2,000 kcal. Let's do the next level. So from primary consumer to secondary consumer, how much energy is going to be in the secondary consumer? We're going to need to do 10% again. So we're going to need to do 10% of 2,000 kcal. That's going to be about 200 kcal. So look at this. From primary producer, 20,000 kcal at primary producer level. Up here we only have 2,000 kcal available. And now only on the second trophic level, we have 200. We're losing so much energy. Energy transfer is very inefficient. It's very inefficient. Okay, now how about this top level of this food chain? For the tertiary consumer, that's the top level of this specific food chain. How much energy can we expect for them to have? 10% of 200, which is literally only 20. So look down here at the bottom. At primary producer, that's 20,000 kcal. That's so much energy. It's so crazy. But then as we go up, we're losing 90% of it each time. So by the time we reach up to that top predator, that Chinook salmon, that tertiary consumer in purple, we only have 20. We started out with 20,000. Now we only have 20. Can you imagine if you had $20,000 and then by the time you get to your third level, you only have $20? You lose so much energy, and that is why there's very few top predators. Right? At the top of the food chain, there's very little energy available. Very little energy available. Okay, let's switch gears and we're going to talk about some different diets. So, different diets of organisms. So, of course, we have our famous herbivore that eats herbs. Herbs are also known as plants. So, herbivore eats plants. Pretty self-explanatory. Then you have a carnivore, eats carne, which if you speak Spanish or if you know of Spanish, you know carne means meat. So, a carnivore eats meat. And then we have what's called an omnivore, eats both. It eats both meat and it eats plants as well. Omnivore eats both. So, what are you? Exactly. You're typically going to be an omnivore unless you are a vegetarian, in which you would be an herbivore. You'd only eat plants. Or you could also be what is known as a vegan, which means you eat no animal products whatsoever. So, typically, most of us are going to be omnivores. If you have a meal that has a steak and some potatoes, omnivore. So, diets of dead things. Decomposers. Decomposers actually are going to break down dead material. That's going to typically be your fungi, like mushrooms, and bacteria. They have what's also called a detritivore. It's going to feed on dead material. So, earthworms feed on dead material. Vultures, those big birds that circle around when there's something dead in an area. And also things like crabs and crawfish and all of that, they feed on dead material. They're detritivores. They eat dead things. All right, let's do some quick checks for understanding. So I'm going to read this question. Rabbits eat grass and other plants to survive, but they do not eat animals. What kind of animal are rabbits? So again, rabbits eat grass and other plants to survive, but they do not eat animals. What type of animal are rabbits? Okay, good. If you said eat plants and herbs means they're an herbivore, then you are correct. They are herbivores. Another question. Let's look at this food chain. It's very simple. Where does the energy start in this food chain? Exactly. Energy always starts from the sun, then goes to the autotrophs, our producers, our plants, and then it goes up the food chain from there. How about this? The food chain is a sequence in which energy is transferred. Is that true? Is a food chain showing energy being transferred? Yes, it is showing energy being transferred. That's literally what the arrows represent. Each arrow is showing energy from the grass goes to the grasshopper. Energy from the grasshopper goes to the mouse. Energy from the mouse goes to the snake. Energy from the snake goes to the bird. Energy from the bird, as it dies, is going to go to the fungi, the decomposers. Decomposers put the nutrients back in the soil, which then, boom, goes back to the plants, and the cycle starts all over again. Okay, so showing energy being transferred. A type of consumer that eats primary consumers is called what? So what is eating a primary consumer? Good job. If you said secondary consumer, you're correct, right? Because primary means one. So what eats the primary? The two. What eats the secondary? The three. Okay, so it just goes 1, 2, 3. All right, so let's just wrap up mini, really fast recap, 30-second recap. I'm going to go really fast. No, I'm not. Actually, I'm out of breath. So energy starts here. Well, truly, to be correct, energy starts from the sun. Then the sun passes that energy along to the plants. Plants pass energy on to herbivores, primary consumers. Primary consumers pass their energy along to secondary consumers. Secondary consumers pass their energy along to tertiary consumers. Tertiary consumers pass their energy on to quaternary consumers. And quaternary consumers die off. As they die, their remains are being decomposed and turned back into nutrients by decomposers, which then go into the soil, and the cycle starts all over again. Okay? The arrows represent what? Right, the arrows represent energy flowing from one organism to the next, showing energy being cycled through the ecosystem. Okay? Good. Good. Okay, so one thing that you just want to make sure that you do not forget is don't forget about fungi and decomposers. Because what they do is they break down dead material and turn them into nutrients. Those nutrients are then used by plants to then feed the rest of the ecosystem again. Okay, so don't forget about them. They're not always written, but they are always there. Okay, don't forget about decomposers. All right, guys, so that's what it is. That's what it is. That's the beginning of food chains. Tomorrow we're going to go more in depth. There's more to know about food webs. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and make sure you do your virtual notebook and your exit ticket. Okay, cool.